have the pleasure of serving multiple departments in the school district, dad to two of our students, a fifth grader at Fern Bluff and a sixth grader at Chisholm Trail. So I've been right there along with you as we've learned how to help our kids and really navigate this new context of learning this year. And I'm going to introduce real quick before we get kicked off to the two people who are really going to be driving the show tonight and sharing their story as Round Rock ISD employees, but also as parents themselves. So I just want to introduce them real quick. The first one is Ms. Christy Evans. Say hello, Christy.
Hi.
So Christy is one of our Texas State Exchange mentor teachers. So what that means is she works with some brand new teachers, and imagine being a brand new teacher this year. So she's got a great job this year of helping, I think about 4 of them currently, really work through the day-to-day of what that means to be a new teacher. And she has 2 high school students of her own that she's helping to navigate this world as well. And the other expert we've got with you tonight is Bethany Cassidy. Say hello, Bethany.
Hi, good evening.
And Bethany is one of our instructional coaches, mainly works at elementary, serves several of our campuses in the Round Rock learning community, and also has an elementary and a middle school student in the district as well. So she'll be able to share some of her insights for both of those lenses. So before they start, I do want to point you to a couple of resources. The first is, you'll see there's a link on the bottom of this slide, and we don't need to click on it right now, but just know that we'll share this slide deck with you afterwards. And that is our kind of our official Schoology resource page, where you can get a lot of the kind of the technical questions answered, like what is a learning management system? You know, what is this thing that my students are engaging with throughout the day to get their assignments, take some of their assessments, find their grades? How does this work and to stay with them over the years by us using the system? So a lot of those questions can be answered there. But we really wanted tonight to be not just a how-to of Schoology, but really talking through definitely that's a piece of it, but really talking through just how do we help our students? How do we help ourselves? How do we help ourselves as family members to navigate this current reality in an as effective and peaceful and healthy way as we can as we help our students. And so the last thing I wanted to point you to before I turn it over to them is there is a Schoology parent access code that you may have received. I'm guessing most of you who are watching right now, if you're watching live, you probably received that. But if you did not, you can go ahead and email me during the presentation, and I'll look it up and I'll email it right back to you in case you don't have it. So that's something we can do to get you set up so you can go in there and help your students navigate their Schoology accounts and really put into play some of the ideas and systems that Christy and Bethany are going to share with us tonight. So I can't thank you all enough for being here tonight. I hope everybody is healthy and taking care of themselves. And I'm going to come back at the end to help with some questions. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to one of our wonderful instructional coaches who are going to take it from here. So go ahead and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. And thank you all for being here tonight and sharing your time, because I know this is precious time. This is the time of the day where probably a lot of busyness is happening in your home, and it's a lot to juggle. So thank you for taking the time to share in a conversation with us tonight, and we hope you get something out of it. So yes, as Ryan talked about, I'm lucky enough to be an employee of the district, but I'm more lucky and more fortunate to be the parents of 2. So I have my daughter is in elementary school, right close to Fern, and she's at summer. And then my son is right down the road at Cedar Valley, and he's in 7th grade. So it's kind of been a unique process to see the differences between elementary and middle school. And I just kind of wanted to talk about some of the things that we've noticed and things that we're still working on as we go through. So thinking about that a little bit, I was trying to figure out how to start, and I was trying to think about like what would be valuable to you. Because I know that this is something that we're all living in, and by no means do I think that we're that we are proficient at this. I think that this work is messy, and this work is so valuable and so important, and we are definitely learning in the moment, and we are not the same family that we were a month ago, and there are a lot of strengths that we've taken along the way. But if I were to think about, you know, a story that kind of, I guess, captures the three things that maybe we've learned that we're strengthening. And the other night, my daughter came in, and it was probably late. It was after dinner, and something triggered and popped into her head, and she remembered that she had an assignment that she hadn't submitted. And I'm sure that's a familiar place for a lot of families. And it was a moment of panic for her. It was, oh my gosh, I need to take care of this. And she had that urgency, and she knew that she needed to do something pretty important with it. So, you know, we stopped and we worked through the assignment, and we figured out what she needed to do. And then once we were finished, we kind of talked more about that process, and we talked about what was happening that day, and maybe ways that we could make it better for her moving forward. And so something pretty important came out of that. And I would say that the biggest thing that came out of that was coming up with a planner. And this is probably something that many families are already doing, but this was something that we were kind of doing beforehand, and we would write things down and make sure in her asynchronous time that she was, you know, self-managing these things. But it worked a lot better for us to think across the week. So that was a product that came out of that conversation. And I have to say, more days than not, it helps, definitely. She's able to go through and check off that assignment and make her feel like, yes, I did my best on that, and I'm done with it, really. And because she's the one that's in those conversations with the teacher, and she's the one who knows. It's not me. I'm not with her, and she's the one who's seen the visuals. She's the one who's had those conversations with the teacher. So she's really driving that conversation. And that night when we were going through that assignment, that's what was evident, is she knew what to do. It was just the panic of I forgot to do it. So coming up with this planner was really, really, really helpful for her to have some self-control and to have some organization. So that's an example of, I think, the first thing that we've learned is to really strengthen our organization, and giving her that planner so she can see not only the day, but across the week. And there's something really powerful about checking things off. It feels really, really good, right? Even if the day changes, which it often does, she's still able to go in there and edit it. And that's a lot of that's a lot of ownership for her. Something else that my husband and I talked about from the beginning was to make an organized workspace. We wanted them to have a space in her home that was just like what she would have at school. We wanted her to have a place where all her tools were. She didn't have to go scrambling around. And that was a place that she knew that was for school. And more importantly, not only was it an organized workspace, but we wanted her to be able to leave it at the end of the day. Now, it didn't work in that night, but I would say more times than not, it does help that she's able to walk away from that space and be like, I did my best today, I'm good. Something else along the lines of the organization that we've learned is to do those reminders. We put alarms on her phone. We have visuals up. You might even be able to see some of them behind me of some things that she's been working on and she's owned. And that helps her to move through and handle it in the most responsible way that she's able as a third grader. Something else that we have learned, and I'm sure all of you have too, is how important we have to pour into communication. Never before is that clearly something we need to do. Emails and working with us, sending emails to the teacher, waiting on emails from the teacher. We've been really, really fortunate in the teachers that both of my children have had and definitely have this year. So their teachers send weekly emails, and there's already that correspondence going back and forth. So for both of my children, there's a lot of email correspondence going. It's also really helpful that the district has a parent listed with the student emails. So when they get an email from the teacher, then I get copied on it. That really, really helps us. And while it does help my daughter, I would say in this example, it probably helps me with my son more, because he's a middle schooler and sometimes our conversations are a little too shortened for my liking. So it really helps that we are having the same content go back and forth, and I know what's going on. Along the lines also with communication, we've learned about checking in with them. This is really important. It was really nice before when we used to be able to open the backpack and we would see all the schoolwork coming home. Now it's really great that we can open up a notebook and we can see examples of their learning, but we need to be able to check in. And so Schoology has really kind of helped us with that. We are still learning it too, and also wearing those double hats, one as an educator and then the other as a parent. And going through, and for me, it's really, really helpful to open up the course that both of them are in and click grades. I can see what their grades are in one like comprehensive view. So that really, really helps. I can also see the assignments that they've submitted, and that really, really helps too. So on a daily basis, we look at the learning product, and on a weekly basis for our family, we check their grades. So that's kind of a good balance for them. I don't want them to feel like we need to check it every day, but if we have to, we have to. So, but Schoology does provide that very easy way of doing that. And then something else that I really kind of think saved the best for the last year that we've learned is, to me and my husband, is really like the foundation of all of it, and that's the emotional health. So I talked about being able to close the door, and we're fortunate that we have this space in our home where we can put them into a room to do their work during the day. But we already talked about that was going to be something where we would have them walk away from that space because we want them to have that separation. So putting them on a schedule and posting that where they work is really, really helpful. So not only do they know when they're logging in, but it gives them that security and that preparation for their day, that they don't have to have any anxiety that they don't know what's coming to them. They deserve to have things in a calm way, and we need to be able to provide that. And so that's something that we really have learned, is to give them that schedule so that they have that emotional health. And then this is more, we're definitely not done learning this, but we have learned how important it is, and that's to do mindfulness activities. So, that's just taking a break. That's taking some brain breaks. Really giving them the idea that, you've been working hard for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, it's time for you to take a little brain break. So get up and stretch. You need to walk around the house, go outside on the swing, just pick up a book, go in a different room, like just taking those brain breaks so that they can almost refresh themselves. That has really helped to reduce any adult learning that might have been imposed on them. They're practicing those skills of doing the mindfulness. So that's something we've learned, is how it's really important. Along those lines, the physical activity, like I mentioned, like getting up and walking around the house. Or we have a dog, taking the dog on a walk. My son does that a lot. Like he'll take a break and he'll take the dog on a walk. They go out and they shoot some baskets. Anything where they can kind of take a physical break away and not sit in front of a computer too much. So obviously both of my kids are doing online. And so they need to have some physical activity, and they need to be able to step away from the computer. So having that physical break and that mindfulness break is really helped how we come together at the end of the day as a family. And it's kind of settled everything. We talk about more of the positives at the end of the day with that. And we learned that probably in the first couple of weeks pretty quickly. We needed to have a clear path for that. And I linked an article right here. I know Ryan mentioned he was going to share this presentation, but this article I think is really, really helpful for parents, not only as educators, but for parents, to really talk about the mental health in this virtual learning environment, and just to give those pointers, and just to really, as much as we can, provide this structure for kiddos. So that they can feel secure, they can feel like they have some control and not have too many surprises. So those are some things that have helped us that we've learned are pretty valuable. But like all of us, our work is not done. And we are definitely, like I said, not the same family we were a couple months ago. And we are really, really learning. So these are, I was trying to think of some things that we are still learning, and it was really hard to just limit it to 3, honestly. But I wanted to really focus on what I think the 3 categories are. And we're trying and trying and trying to do some self-paced strategies. My son in middle school, just, just the age, he's developmentally, he's pretty good at this, and he can pace himself through. Like he knows how to balance his day with that. He knows when he's got something he needs to manage, he can check himself, take some breaks, go slow. We're working on that for my daughter, but we also recognize we can't impose those adult expectations on her because she's only 8. So we need to do some of those reflection moments, like let's think through this before we start clicking a whole bunch of things. And I think that's something that we're learning that's really helping her, and we're going to continue to keep working on that. So, and then really asking questions. And it's so hard to transfer things sometimes in the virtual environment, but we are asking a lot of questions. And so it's making us make better questions, I guess. And, what were you learning in this assignment? What was the example that the teacher gave you? So we're asking a lot of questions to them, but what's kind of cool is that they're learning to ask more questions, and they're not so impulsive like they were at the beginning. So it's more like they're waiting until the end, or writing things down if they need to, and then they're asking questions. Obviously, I see this a lot more with my son who's in middle school, but he's had years of practice with that. My daughter is making huge strides in this, and I'm really, really proud of her for doing that. And it's definitely something that she's got some good examples for. So we're trying to frame things when we ask questions in a really positive way, so that it helps her with what she's trying to accomplish. So it's more constructive, I guess, is the best way to say that. And then definitely troubleshooting technology hiccups. So this is kind of funny. When I asked both of them, what should I share as something that we're still learning for this tonight? And both of them said, oh, troubleshooting, definitely. That's something that we're still learning. And I think we're all probably still learning that. And I mean, we learned it tonight. And it's just the reality, and it's going to happen. And just like I tell my students, it's like the computers aren't as smart as you. You're smarter than the computer. So let's take a break. Let's think through this. And I bet we can come up with a way to kind of reboot it. So things that we do that we're still learning, if we have to, we refresh a lot. We close out and we restart. We open multiple tabs, but we really, really have tried to work on not opening too many, because then that's too much to manage. That's way too many things to manage. So refreshing, and along with that, rebooting, really opening multiple tabs, but not opening more than just a couple, because that's too much. And at the end of the day, honestly, we're still trying to remember to power our devices and to plug them in, because it's taking care of your materials for school, right? So that's something that we're helping. And I guess the last example with how we're learning troubleshooting is, just like connecting. And my son is really great about reaching out to some of his friends that are in his classes. It's really great in middle school. They kind of follow this cohort of classes. And so he's great about reaching out if something isn't loading or something like that, and getting his friends to share something if he needs it for an assignment. And that's been a great workaround too, honestly. But that's been really, really helpful. And it's been fun. We're definitely still learning. And just on a human level, like my husband is an ITS, and he knows technology and he knows computers. And this has been a very humbling experience. I think we have all started with something that we're learning, and that's been actually kind of fun, is for the first time, we're all starting in the same place. So, so I guess that's really 3 things that we're still learning. And I ask a lot of questions and I reach out to colleagues and other parents and try to find literature to read and try to figure out ways to make things better. And there's so much out there, but there's also some trends in what you see. So you have to really dig through and find the things that you're still learning and try to find some literature to match that. So that's really kind of, I think, the gist of where like we're at as a family from elementary and middle school, like what we've learned, what we're still working on. And I'm gonna pass the baton to Christy here, and I think she's going to talk about the high school level.
And I know we've had a few new people join, so I wanted to kind of introduce myself again. I'm Christy Evans. I am an exchange teacher for the Texas State Teacher Fellows, which means I mentor new teachers who are having to have their first year in the middle of a pandemic. And I'm also mom to two high school students who are freshmen around our high school. They're twins. And so one thing that I can definitely say is even having two twins in the same house, they haven't necessarily needed all the same things from me. And so one big lesson I would say is like, we're throwing out a lot of ideas, but it's knowing your own child and kind of finding what works for your own child. And so in addition to talking to my two kids, I talked to our friend group because we have a core group of friends that my boys kind of rely on and other moms that I kind of rely on. And so I kind of went to them for some help too. And so I wanted to kind of focus on 3 things we've learned. And then under each thing, I've kind of given some things that have worked for some of our kids. One thing that I saw that first week was my kids really needed organization and routine. I think they got really used to in the spring how while they did all their work, it was very laid back. They could sleep till noon. They could do a lot of the work after dinner if they wanted. And so with the way school is now, it more resembles a traditional schedule. And so we needed systems in place that did. So they both have cell phones in high school. And so we actually set alarms on their phone. That's their bell schedule. They don't have a snooze button that is disabled for those alarms. And it tells them like which class to be in. We also initially had some issue with A day and B day. And so one of the things that I did was set up a spiral notebook. They each have 2 notebooks, one for A day, one for B day. So even the day before, they can set it out so it's ready in their school place, so they don't have to like all of a sudden they're trying to log on and oh my gosh, wait, which day is it? It gives them a place to write down reminders. Some of the teachers want them to keep notes, and so it gives them a place to do that. And it also gives me a place to write them notes, especially once I wasn't working from home all the time anymore and I was going to be gone while they were doing school. I could leave them like notes in their notebook. To-do lists have also been huge. We have some as a family and some that I'm teaching them to make themselves. And that's kind of a whole other lesson in itself is at first, because they're 14 and they're in high school, I think I made assumptions about a lot of things that I thought they just knew that actually they needed to be taught. And utilizing a to-do list was one of those. We have a small whiteboard as a family where I write them reminders and they can add reminders. It's just one place for us all to kind of stay organized. And kind of like Bethany mentioned, I really wanted them to have a workspace that was comfortable and like without just a whole lot of distraction, but also a place they could walk away from so they didn't feel like they were at school all day. Because I know when I was first working from home, I kept telling people that I didn't feel like I worked from home. I felt like I lived at work. And so I don't want them to have that feeling necessarily. And so I did like them having a separate workspace. Although what's morphed over time for my kids is they have more than one place they like to work. And they even go outside to work sometimes. And so that's become a little bit flexible for us. But definitely, my kids needed routines and they needed organization. A big thing for me too, as a parent, since I'm an educator and I've sometimes even worked in the same building where my boys are students, I've been involved, but I always kind of took a more just cheerleader support role. I definitely checked home access. In middle school, I taught them to do that so that they did that more than I did. I was friends with a lot of their teachers because they went to the middle school where I used to teach. And so like I knew their teachers would get in touch with me if needed. But I realized probably about a month into this, maybe less, that I had to be way more involved. That there were things that typically happened at school that like weren't happening for my kids. And so in addition to checking home access more often than I was in a traditional school year, I really had to start learning how to use Schoology. So I have a small screenshot of it here, but on the next page, I've actually enlarged it so that you can see. This is kind of like, if you have an account, this is kind of what you see when you first view your kids. And up in the top right-hand corner, when you first log in, you're viewing as yourself as a parent, but then after you add all of your different children in, like you don't have to have different logins for every child, it's all in one place. And so you can view it as different children. Now that's a little deceiving in a way because you don't see everything your child sees, but you're seeing from the parent view for that child. And so up at the top, it even says you are currently you are viewing as, and I've marked out my child's name for his own privacy. But on the right-hand side is something that I find incredibly useful because it shows you recent grades that you can click on and see recent grades that have been entered. It shows you if anything was overdue. So last night or a few days ago when whenever I took this screenshot, my son had nothing overdue, which was awesome. If there's anything there, like that's a thing as a parent, I can always call them in and be like, hey, what's this? Have you worked on this? Because one thing that I was finding that needed my oversight was my kids were finishing things, but they weren't always submitting them or submitting them in the right place. And so they had all this great work, but it wasn't being graded because it hadn't been submitted. And so that was a learning experience for them. And then it shows you upcoming. So as a parent, if you kind of want to know the next day what to ask them about, it can be, hey, how did you do with that Spanish assignment I saw you were going to be doing, or you can see that a test is upcoming, so you can remind them to study or oversee a little studying. So however involved you need to be with your child, this kind of shows you where you can focus that. And then what you see on the left-hand side, scrolling almost like a Facebook page, shows several different things. It shows you things that have been turned in, what their grades were. We have open house tomorrow night at the high school, and so there was an announcement for that. And so as a parent, I'm not having to rely on my kid to make sure that I know about it. I see it on my own parent page. And so you can see a lot of the updates. Now, before we move on from Schoology, I do want to say, though, that one thing that was valuable, at least in the beginning, was in addition to my parent page, just sitting down with my child at their computer and being in their Schoology. Because there's a lot of things you can see from the parent page, but you can't see everything. And so, especially if you want to monitor some of the quality of your child's work. For example, I was a language arts teacher, so I definitely wanted to see the papers they'd been turning in. So I was able to give them some advice, like next time on your paper, why don't you consider this? Or you can check to see if your child's following directions. If it says 4-paragraph essay, you can see if they are. There's a lot of things you can see, both on the parent Schoology and being with your child at their computer to look at it through their eyes as well. And so the third thing that we've really learned on the next slide is communication with teachers. Kind of like Bethany said before, I have never communicated with teachers so much, even when I was in the building. And I'll kind of admit, even as an educator at first, we were kind of avoiding that. As I said, I'm mentoring new teachers, so I know how difficult this is for them too. So I just kept thinking, we can handle this, this is fine. But when I finally both emailed the teachers, but more often had my boys sit down and email them from their email account, what we got back was so much support, a whole lot of grace. When they realized my son hadn't turned in a bunch of assignments because he hadn't known how to submit them, or he had been clicking this one button and thought they were all submitted. Everything got turned in and graded. Nothing was even counted late. We saw teachers who are also parents who are handling the same thing with their kids at home. And so that's one of my big recommendations to all my friends is both email the teacher and have your child email and ask those questions, and let them know when like something was messed up. If something's turned in like a couple of days late, email so they know it was turned in, because like they might not even know that it was turned in because it wasn't there the first time they checked. Some other things that have worked really well for my kids, because since they are in high school, I do want to encourage them to have most of that communication. But one thing that's worked for them is staying a little bit late in the Google Meet to talk to it, to be able to talk with the teacher. A lot of their teachers are also having tutorials, but I don't think the boys realize that. But like the information was in Schoology, but it wasn't presented to them maybe in the way they're used to when they're at school in person. And so those tutorials have just been so helpful for them to be able to go both get extra help, make up a quiz, redo a quiz, be able to ask questions. All of those things have been really great. And I don't intend to imply that, you know, one person's experience is exactly the same with another's, but between the two boys, we have at least a dozen or more teachers that we're like communicating with. And just, I have to say overall, just as I said, so helpful and like so much grace given to my kids. I will say, in talking to my friend group and talking about like these three things that we've learned, we have within our friend group girls and boys, students who have taken, who are on 504 plans for dyslexia, students who are on an IEP, students who are in all advanced classes, students who are in the talented and gifted program. Like it really runs the gamut. But what we found helped kids, like these three things really helped all of our kids, regardless of their ability level and the types of classes they were taking. And so that's really been what's most helpful to us in high school.
All right, well, thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say some things about questions, but I'll turn it over to you.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to invite them to use the Q&A or however they would like to ask questions. If they would like to ask it out loud, I can unmute them so that they'd be able to talk and ask their question out loud if they'd like to do that as well.
But if we don't have any live questions, that's obviously okay as well. I really want to thank you guys for, you know, kind of opening up and sharing some of the celebrations and some of the things we're going to continue to work on as parents, you know, and helping our students and our children, you know, navigate this this current reality that they're working in. And I think we might have had a question come up. So it says, the original guide for Schoology said that through the parent login, we could see our kids' assignments, but not, of course, edit or submit. But that's not how it's working. We can't see what was submitted or even submission status in some cases. You can speak to that a little bit. Do either of you have a use case of that, or
That's actually a really good question. I've been in that moment before too, where I'm trying to see the assignment, and you're right. I don't know if that always works. I think what we have done is we've been able to go, most of the assignments sometimes are in their Google Drive. So we've been able to go into the Google Drive to see what their work look like. That doesn't happen every time. I do know that, because it depends on what assignment has been asked by the teacher. But that is one way we have been able to do it. And then I am noticing a trend with the teachers, which I really, really like, is that I'm starting to see almost that pendulum go a little bit back towards putting things in notebooks and in paper and things like that, and really creating some of those products in there. So there's been a lot of times where I've asked my son and my daughter to show me their physical copy, and let's look in the notebook and see what they created. So you're right, it doesn't always submit or show up, but those are two ways that we have been able to find the assignment.
Yeah, and I can say I was on a call with because it seems like we've been doing this a long time, but we are still in the middle of the implementation phase of Schoology and the LMS Learning Management System. And I was on a call today and have another one tomorrow where we're talking specifically about if these are assignments in the Google Suite Sync is what we call it, is that is continuing to be a relatively minor but significant pain point, you know, that's not always working exactly the way that we're hoping that it works. So I can say that is something that we're working through to try to get that more seamless, because you're right, you should be able to see the whether it's in a Google Drive or Google Doc slide type assignment or an actual assignment within Schoology. We are hoping that we get to a point where it's more consistent, where you can't see that. I know with my son, because I ran into that too, he's not always happy about it, but I just tell him to log in as himself, or I log in as him, and then look at it that way. I know that's not the perfect way to do it, but in the time being, that is a way that we can work around that.
That's exactly why I mentioned that sometimes I just sit down with them at their computer and I want to see their Schoology.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anybody else? Any other questions for tonight? I posted the slide deck presentation in the chat, so anybody can access that there. And we'll be posting this around various places on our Round Rock ISD sites as well. So we'll get one more last call for any questions from our guests. And the last thing that I think I'd like to just leave you with, something that I caught myself thinking about this morning as I was sitting down with my middle schooler and looking at his Schoology account and, you know, talking through, you know, grades and assignments that might not have been, you know, where he and I were hoping they were. And and my kids, I didn't mention this, but my kids have been, they're going to campus each day. And I think I really caught myself, you know, and I obviously should know this and remember this, but even our kids that are going to campus every day, it's not anywhere near a normal school environment or a learning experience for them. And just like, when in doubt, just give them a break, you know, and give them you know, just give them some grace and yourself some grace, and the fact that our teachers are going to work with you. So if there's an assignment that, you know, is a 60 or a 30, you know, and it's not worth arguing with your kids about, you know, talk to them about it, help them email the teacher. You know, we can work through it, you know. So there's going to be a lot of frustrating points, especially if your student is used to getting, you know, high grades on every assignment, and now they're in this hybrid virtual pandemic world that we're all trying to navigate through, and they might not be getting that same kind of you know, feedback of high grades like they used to. So we got to be cognizant of that and help them work through that as well. And we got to take a moment ourselves and recognize that a lot of times. So I think that's just what I'd like to leave everybody with tonight. And again, thank Bethany and Christy for sharing your thoughts. And thank you for our live participants and everybody else who's watching the recording. So everybody have a great night. I think we're going to call it a night. Thank you.